So your report was a little too pro-American for them? Is that what you inferred?
Well, God, if you're going to insist that I give you short answers, the short answer to that question is yes.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief for Real Clear Politics. Talking now with Peter Berkowitz, a friend of the show and a contributor, regular columnist for Real Clear Politics. Peter doesn't write, 750-word columns that he dashes off. He writes essays that he thinks about deeply. And I'm sure if you're listening to our program, well, I'm not sure, but I hope you're familiar with his work. Peter, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Carl.
Yesterday, we talked a lot about the State Department, but I want to come back to that because you worked there. And, President Trump did all these things at the State Department. And I want to ask you a couple of questions about, first of all, just the legality of it. Can a president with a stroke of the pen get rid of an agency like USAID, which was kind of on the auspices of the State Department, was considered all but an independent agency, and it was created by a statute of Congress many years ago, I think during the Kennedy administration. Can a president just do away with it, like with a stroke of a pen?
No, the president cannot, and the president hasn't. Happily for us, Secretary of State Rubio clarified matters earlier today. It turns out that USAID has been put under the authority of Secretary of State Rubio. That is, he is now the acting director of USAID, and by statute, USAID actually does report to the Secretary of State. So what you can say is, notwithstanding the hoopla around this, what President Trump has done is streamline operations at USAID, bringing it directly under control of the Secretary of State.
Well, that sounds like, good, maybe not good government, good business, certainly.
Yeah.
But so is anything being lost? Was there a reason, a legitimate reason, other than bureaucratic, for that agency to have its own command structure?
There was undoubtedly a good reason for it at the beginning, but President Trump's argument, and it must be said now, Secretary of State Rubio's argument, he made this in a kind of impromptu conversation with reporters this morning, is that spending at USAID has gotten out of control. It has become highly partisan. It does not advance the interests of the United States, at least as this administration understands those interests. It had defied the Trump administration's initial efforts over the last 2 weeks to undertake some accounting of that spending. And under those circumstances, it does seem to me that the head of the executive branch and the Secretary of State are right to say, stop, let's investigate what's going on, and let's make sure the tremendous sums that are being doled out by the USAID are doled out in ways that advance U.S. interests and not merely a set of partisan interests.
So what would be an example of something that USAID was doing during the Biden administration that the Trump administration would find really didn't fit its goals, didn't fit why Trump ran. He ran as a kind of protectionist. He had a series of things, everything America first, make America great again. When Marco Rubio first got there, he puts out this directive, things don't directly advance the interests of the United States. We have no business doing them. What would be an example that USAID might have been doing that wasn't good for the country, at least in the minds of the Trump officials?
Well, here's a bizarre example that's just come to my attention based on reporting. It turns out that USAID gave funds to the Rockefeller Foundation, which distributed funds to local NGOs, including one run by Bill Kristol, with seemingly advancing the interests of a magazine he runs called The Bulwark. That seems to me a undertaking by USAID that is not consistent with the Trump administration's understanding of America's vital national security interests.
Well, Peter, I saw that on Twitter. I guess I'm supposed to call it X. Yes, is that really true?
I don't know. I haven't checked it myself, but I am confident that one could find around the world various politicized investments that I would be surprised if one didn't find in the accounting
Well, look, what you say is true. Our listeners should know. And the Bulwark is a publication devoted to attacking Donald Trump.
Yes.
And I certainly understand. I do not question the motives of people who find Donald Trump problematic and their right to attack him. It's a little bracing to learn that taxpayers' money was going towards that endeavor, I have to say.
Well, not only that, it's taxpayer money that is intended to support causes abroad that align with America's national security interests. In any case, I'm confident that the accounting will show that USAID funding tends overseas to support progressive causes, NGOs that may present themselves as neutral, but lean in one particular political direction, and so on. And in any case, this we do know, that the officials at the USAID were impeding the investigation that the Trump administration was undertaking. For sure, the executive branch is entitled to a serious accounting of where American money is going. If you are impeding that investigation for whatever motives, the executive branch and the head of the executive branch, the Secretary of State and the president, are entitled to remove people who are impeding that investigation and proceed with the investigation.
You're listening to Peter Berkowitz on Sirius XM Radio. I'm Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief of RealClearPolitics. Peter, I wanted to ask you, you worked at the State Department under Secretary Mike Pompeo.
Yes.
And I'm wondering what you see so far, the early stages. Pompeo and Marco Rubio seem to me to be pretty simpatico, but it's a different Trump administration this time around. He hit the ground running. He's got priorities. He's really before his Trump, when he ran in 2016, his rhetoric was different, but this time his policies seem to match the rhetoric. What do you see as the primary difference between what do you anticipate is going to be the difference in emphasis between Marco Rubio and Mike Pompeo?
Well, a superficial difference is Rubio's setting out on his first trip abroad to Central America. He, in fact, published a piece in the Wall Street Journal on Friday with the clever title "America's First," meaning we have to pay attention to our neighbors. I think that's right, but I actually think it was misleading and disguised the continuity between the Rubio State Department and the Pompeo State Department. Why do I say that? Well, if you actually read the piece, you discover that one of the reasons that Rubio wants to travel to Central America is in order to bolster American relations, in order to counter Chinese encroachments in Central America. We saw fruit of that trip also reported today, that the head of Panama has agreed to terminate a deal with the Chinese for management of the canal. This is a win for Rubio. This is a win for the Trump administration, and in my judgment, a win for the United States. To complete the answer to your question, though, what this shows is that the question of the Chinese Communist Party and its conduct in all regions of the world to induce economic and diplomatic and political dependence on nation states, that was an important theme of the last 18 months of Mike Pompeo's tenure as Secretary of State. And it looks to me, I see encouraging signs that it will be a guiding theme of the Rubio State Department. And that is, I believe, as it should be.
You know, when you were in the State Department, you put out, there was a paper that came out that you had a hand in it, talking about the State Department should be extolling American values in the world, and that these values are constitutional: democracy, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, certainly. What would the Biden administration seems to have, sort of anything Pompeo did, Antony Blinken didn't want to do. But why would you? What was their problem with promoting American values? What were they thinking is a better role for the State Department and for American diplomacy?
Well, in their way, they sought to promote things, but this is a guess at at what repelled them from what we did. As you know, Secretary Blinken formally repudiated the report of the Commission on Unalienable Rights shortly after he entered office. There was no need for him to do this because nobody had formally adopted our report. I think it offended.
Yeah, but what about, okay, what in the report didn't you like? I read the report. I thought it was great. I didn't see how anybody, Republican, Democrat, or Independent, could object to it. What did I miss?
It seems to me obvious that neither Secretary Blinken nor the team that drafted his remarks read the report, because there's no sin of which he accused us that we were guilty. I could go through the 8 or 9 sins that he
give us 3 or 4.
Yeah, give us 3 or 4. The report doesn't recognize that liberal democracies are particularly well suited to advance the cause of human rights. We recognize that. The report does not recognize that the human rights are thought to be interlocking. You can't just pick and choose. We recognize this. The report doesn't give sufficient appreciation to pluralism in implementing rights around the world. We emphasize this. I could go on.
Okay, so you wrote a report stressing that American foreign policy should be, the one key aspect of it should be promoting human rights. And they wrote a rebuttal, said, we don't like this because it doesn't advocate promoting human rights. Short. How's it, the Twitter version?
In short, yes. In short, yes.
But the real objection was that it came out of the Trump administration.
Yeah, but there was one other objection, one other aspect of our report to which they objected. We said that America's commitment to what are indeed universal rights is deeply rooted in America's national traditions, and we should focus on America's national traditions as the reason for our commitment to these universal rights. We acknowledge that other countries, other peoples, other civilizations may go about defending universal rights their way, but we should proudly affirm that our commitment to universal rights, the rights all human beings share, are rooted in our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, our mode of government.
All right, here's a softball question then. So your report was a little too pro-American for them? Is that what you inferred?
Well, God, if you're going to insist that I give you short answers, the short answer to that question is yes.
Well, look, it's a new day, for better or worse. You've been listening to Real Clear Politics on SiriusXM. I'm Carl M. Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief. I'm talking with my good friend Peter Berkowitz of the Hoover Institution, and a former State Department official and a frequent columnist for us. So be sure to be on the lookout for all of Peter's writings. And with that, I'll bid you adieu. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow, 3 o'clock in California, where I'm from, 6 p.m. here in the East. Have a good evening.